Great. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm glad everyone is here. I think we'll go ahead and get started since it's 15 after.
Yes, sir.
Uh, all right. Is okay to start now, Dr. Lacey?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, my name is Joe Powell, and I'm a young person in long-term recovery. And it's only because of recovery that I'm able to be a father and a husband today, and a lifelong learner and a servant leader, and the president and CEO of APA, the Association of Persons Affected by Addiction in Dallas, Texas, now for 23 years. And APA's mission is to educate all segments of the community about addiction and mental health recovery, and provide recovery support services to individuals, families, and the community. Recovery Community Organization, what APA is, of course, is an independent nonprofit organization, right? And what we do is we increase recovery workforce by being a training entity and also learning how do you provide recovery, wellness, and health in the community. So the workforce capacity, we engage and we train peer specialists who are experientially expertise. We call them experientially experts. These guys have lived experience, right, with peer support. And peer support training and education we want to provide. But we carry out our recovery-focused outreach and programs to engage people who are in recovery, people that are seeking recovery, and also the community, and provide that public awareness. We also provide and spread peer recovery support services in the community through the courts, the justice involved. We'll talk some more about that later on. Also in crisis center, hospitals, detox, church, you name it, in the community. When we started this, I said, wherever people are, we know addiction and mental health challenges are there. So we need to be there. Recovery, people need to see recovery. So we host local, regional, and national recovery celebrations. We collaborate on integrations of wellness and recovery-focused activities for mental health and substance use, also for prevention, harm reduction, early intervention, treatment, and community initiatives. This is the model pretty much of recovery community organization. We do not do treatment, we only do recovery community support services. So, and we do that by connecting and mobilizing the community. We build relationships and link to the communities like we're doing while I'm here today. And of course, we support by being of service and of course support recovery, but also build our recovery community organization. We are a national accredited recovery organization. So what that means is that we have 30 standards to live by with our accreditation. It's called a CAPRS, which stands for Council on Accreditation for Peer Recovery Support Services. And in that, we have, of course, not only 30 standards, but we have our 6 guiding principles right in front of you, where we always put recovery first, right? And inclusive of everyone in the community is included, everyone. Authenticity, we have to be real about who we are as people in recovery. And it is a participatory process. And I manage in a participatory style, meaning that everybody is included. I always ask questions and always include people, and I want everyone to participate in recovery and wellness. Strength-based, we are strength-based. We only practice strength-based and recovery capital. We don't do needs assessments. We only do strength assessments. And we don't even use the word, any clinical language. We're trying not to use as far as, but assessment is one thing that you do want to assess before we could do a recovery plan in the community or on individuals or families. You have to assess, but we do strength. Okay, what is it they bring to the table? What strengths do they have? How have they overcame all of the trauma and drama that they've came through? And then being culturally congruent to the communities we serve, we also, as a recovery organization, do that. Now, here's a picture of my family. I know you can see, and all y'all can tell where I am on this picture. That's me at the bottom left. And so you see the 3 cowboys there with the cowboys, the black cowboys there. But again, here's a family, and my youngest brother wasn't born yet. My mother, who you see there, had 7 boys and 1 girl. And so my youngest brother, Phil, he's not there. Both my mother and father passed from trauma. When I say that, is that my dad died from alcoholism, and my mother is very traumatic because she had to live, and we all lived with an alcoholic dad in the house, right, for years. And the trauma of living with that, along with seeing your mother, of course, being traumatized, and the violence in the house, as well as violence out the house. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but this is the family, and my beautiful mother there. But and my youngest brother wasn't born yet. Just to give you a little bit more about myself and my family, my father, the first three kids, was the Powell brothers, and we entertained, and my father taught us to do what he did before we was even born, which was tap dance. We tap dance, spin trays, spin canes, and then you see here, this is the Ebony magazine. Ebony magazine for years, and this right here is 1956. And I don't know if you can see that, but right in the middle paragraph there, it says Tommy was 8, William was 7, and Joe was 4. And we was on television. This is a picture of us on the Ted Mack Amateur Hour show on television when we entertained. So I always tell people that I've been working since I was 4 years old, because this is how we paid the rent. We entertained on stage in New York City. I'm from Harlem, New York, for all my life growing up till I went into the military at 20. So, but here's my dad, and I don't know if you can see his feet. His feet is on top of the chairs there. And this is what he did as far as entertaining, right? He was with his group before we was born was called Hat, Cane, and Trey. And he was Hat. So he would get up on top of the chairs, and then he twirl the hat, the top hat, take the top hat off his head, twirl it, throw the hat up in the air, dive into the split. So you see right there with chairs, he jump off that in the middle into a split, and then catch the hat on his head, right? So that was that right there was, growing up and watching my father do that. And guess what? He did that drunk. For many years, he was drunk and intoxicated. And we say, Dad, don't go up there. And he would get up on the stage and entertain anyway. But at that time, now remember how I said 1956. So in the 50s and 60s, entertainment was also part of, and that's a whole nother thing that I'm gonna be talking about, as far as how even with entertainment, it became an ism. It's like you have alcoholism, show business also becomes an ism, and you know that how many folks have died from drugs and alcohol that was entertainers, right? And how did that affect a family's life? So let's look at some more of the first Blacks in long-term recovery. And here you have Frederick Douglass. So Bill White, William White, he's one of the historians who says that Frederick Douglass was probably one of the first alcoholic in recovery, because in 1845, right, he was part of the Black Temperance societies, right? And the temperance meaning, of course, that, to stop, alcoholism, stop drinking, right? And so they had white temperance societies, and then they had the Black. And the Black one really came from out of the church because of the pledge that Frederick Douglass created for the slaves back in 1845. And he said that, that we can't stagger into freedom, right? We don't want to be staggering. And of course, Frederick Douglass being also a slave abolitionist, as well as a peer advocate, because of course, he said that I am a temperance man because I am an anti-slavery man, and I am an anti-slavery man because I love my fellow man. So Frederick Douglass was a powerful in what he did as far as the temperance movement, right? And here's just another piece on Frederick Douglass as far as the temperance movement again, and what that meant as far as decreasing the consumption by getting the men to make the pledge right in front of the church congregation. And then they would move on into sobriety from there. Here's another little piece that William White did on Frederick Douglass. And of course, there is the speech that Frederick Douglass delivered in Scotland in 1846, where he talked about the church and then how his role and how he moved people into slaves into recovery. Great, a lot of literature out by Frederick Douglass. Here, right here, we're going to look at what Dr. King Davis pretty much did. Dr. King Davis, we'll talk a little bit more about him in a second, but he actually went, he was from the commission, he was a commissioner of Virginia over the mental health and substance use for the state of Virginia many years ago, but he came to Texas and was, not only was a professor at UT and created the African diaspora there at UT, but also he was the executive director for the Hogg Foundation in Austin, Texas. But he did the history work on the first, not only going back to slavery, but also the first hospital, African-American hospital, first Black hospital for freed slaves, right? But here in his hypothesis on race and mental illness, from 1700 to 2018, 3 years ago, he talks about how slaves, that we really didn't, they said the slave, could not have a mental health challenge, couldn't have a mental illness, right? That we was immune to that because, we don't get stress because we're supposed to be, we wasn't human, right? And then of course, 1861 to 1968, a lot of happened since then with the freedom, migration, urban living, and predicted major increases in mental illness, but also drug use and violence and dependency. And then, of course, small differences that happened again from 1969 to 2018 by race and major differences in access and misdiagnosis, as far as how the mental health system moved from there, even with help seeking. Let me see. So here in our own voice, this is Vanessa Jackson. I used to work with King Davis and the National Leadership Council on African American Behavioral Health. And Vanessa Jackson was part of that for 20 years. And in her article, she did an article we're gonna look at for in a minute, but she talks about the depth of spiritual wounding that can occur when an individual is cut off from his or her religious community, or even worse, when religion is used to further abuse people, is incredible. On the other hand, the power that spirituality has to heal and to restore a survivor's sense of self and serve as a vehicle for reconnection to community is equally powerful. This is the article and that she did. It's a great paper that she did on In Our Own Voice, she called it. And a lot came out of this right here. And this is on the African-American stories of oppression, survival, and recovery in the mental health systems. And mainly she did this is about her own family in the mental health system, as well as how the system, survivors of that system, okay? So this is she says it's about time discovering, recovering, and celebrating psychiatric consumer and survivor history with her family. So she says, of course, that we acknowledge the painful truth that our invisibility has not been limited to the pages of history, but is alive and well in our families and communities today. As we listen to the voices of the men and women who shared their stories, we will hear the profound pain caused by mentalism, she calls it, and discrimination in our most important relationships, including the relationships with mental health providers. This guide that she has here and the sharing of connections, and I hope will emerge from its use, will provide us with opportunity as survivors. She calls us survivors, right, coming through to our own wounding and recovery, and offer our experiences as lessons to our community. Okay, so on our survival and triumph. So this is great stuff that what we're looking at here as far as our history. And this is where King Davis, what I was wanting to let you know is not only was he a senior researcher, but also he went back and was able to raise funds to get to go to the first freed hospital, African American psychiatric hospital in the United States, right? Which was, and look at the name. When we look at language and dehumanizing, even there with the language as far as Central Lunatic Asylum for the Colored Insane. This was what the name of the hospital was. And so, and of course, this hospital was in 1870, but King Davis was able to raise funds and of course, and talk with the legislative bodies at that time, governing bodies, to go in and get all of the records, 800,000 records he received. And those 800,000 records, guess what? He brought those back to Texas and was able to digitize those records and is now, of course, writing a book. And also a lot of people in the United States, Black folks there who have relatives. I always say that I know I probably got a grandparent or someone, cousin or someone that was in that hospital. But again, that hospital, he was able to get all of the records and shackles and chains and stuff out of there for the history, to preserve that history of mental health. The Central Lunatic Asylum, again, here it is again, 1870 in Petersburg, Virginia. And I was stationed there, as a matter of fact, in basic training for Lindenwood, Missouri, but also as the first mental hospital for the newly freed slaves, right, in the United States. The hospital was created in Virginia legislation in response to ending the Civil War and the abolishment of slavery and pressure from the Freedmen's Bureau to create a healthcare facilities for our population. Here's just to show you a little bit about some of the diagnosis going all the way back to 1840, right, the 1940s, right, on how not only the same mental health challenges, even more so, but also even alcoholism is on here too. And we just talked about how in the 1840s was Frederick Douglass, 1845, right? They were saying the slave and did the pledge to free slaves to stop drinking alcohol. But here's some of the mental health challenges that they went through. And all of this is, of course, relates to the trauma. So we hear a lot about how the groundwater or how the trauma that we experienced for the last 400 years in the country, and also how it moved to the roots underground, right? What is the root cause, we say, right, of something? So when you look at poverty, discrimination, or community disruption, right, lack of opportunity, social, of course, poor housing quality, and this is today. This, is, of course, has been going on for years, but in that, in the roots right here. And the one thing about the ACEs here, and some of y'all, I'm sure, if you are a social behavioralist or social scientist, then you know about the ACEs. You know about the adverse childhood experiences that we experience, and that childhood experience study that was done was for 17,000 people that participated in the study, right? They all was from Kaiser Permanente Insurance, where the 17,000 people, and 80% of that study, of course, was Caucasian, was white. And the thing is that the 10 questions, right? I always say, where's the question living while Black? Because the racism wasn't on that trauma list. And those were the 10 questions that had to do, which we have right here above the ground, where we see as far as adverse childhood, ranging from domestic violence, substance use, emotional, maternal depression, physical and emotional neglect, divorce, mental illness, incarceration, homeless. So, and even in that domestic violence, they actually have one of the questions, have a child, because remember, that adverse childhood experience questions is from birth to 18 years old, right? And so in those first 18 years of life, right? And for me, you saw how I was an entertainer at 4 years old. So I mean, I saw stuff because I was entertaining also at nightclubs. I had to go to nightclubs because that's how we paid the rent, right? But entertaining when you're talking about the show business. But there's many ways. These are just 10, but you can add on trauma, and that's not on here. They have updated the adverse childhood, but also you have the community environment piece, and that's the part where again that a lot of times people we don't see when it gets into the social determinants of health, but also right here, those adverse community environments. And of course, APLA, my organization, is on Martin Luther King Boulevard in South Dallas. And for years, even before we even moved over there, 8 years ago, I would do groups over there, outside groups that we have on Martin Luther King at the church. One was Hope in the Hood was the name of it, but also we did group after group, a lot of work in the community. So recovery, let's move toward recovery, which again, recovery is a process of change through which individuals improve our health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach our full potential. This right here, we developed with the federal government. They invited 10 of us on the substance use addiction side recovery, and then 10 on from the mental health in 2012 when we went to Washington, D.C. And for 2 days, they had us all in the room with a couple of facilitators. And this was the definition that the federal government SAMHSA uses today. And this is what we came up with, right? Okay. And so recovery is a process, right? Every day, no matter how many years or how many days that you have, it's always a process of change, okay, to improve our health and wellness. And we want to live self-directed life. We have to honor your path of recovery and strive to reach our full potential. Very important. So we got a little pushback on that. This definition didn't say stop doing drugs and alcohol and mental health challenges. Well, guess what? This is not about the problem. This is about the solution, recovery. So we came back, SAMHSA really came back with this right here. I mean, we did send out some emails with recovery happens where? And with health, home, purpose, and in the community only. So in our health, right, again, this is about us paying attention to how we move and outcome once we stop, whether it's abstinence from alcohol or drugs, or whether you're using medication-assisted treatments or medication-assisted recovery, right? But also, so for those that are in recovery, we want to make informed, healthy choices to support our physical and emotional well-being. Home, it has to be a safe place, whether it's in the home, or whether it's at a recovery center, or whether it's in a community, or whether it's in church or wherever. We need a safe place to recover. Okay, we can't, it's difficult and challenging to recover when there's drug and alcohol and violence and trauma and drama at the house, right? Safe place to recover. Purpose, now we got a job, we got housing, right? We're volunteering, we're lifelong learners today, right? And we honor in our culture today. Very important that we have purpose and meaning in our lives today. And then what recovery has to happen where? In the community, right? And so in that community is where we get those supportive relationships, social connections. You want to connect to health, wellness, and recovery the best that we can, okay? And so that's very important, be culturally congruent and in that beloved community. All right, let's look at that culture, okay? And what does that mean? So.
And Joe, I wanted to let you know you have about 7 minutes.
7 minutes, all right. Well, we're gonna move, I think, to a couple of things. I'm gonna move through pretty fast now. One is to go back to recovery support. Just to know again that recovery peer support services is non-clinical, okay? This is not, even though I'm a licensed chemical dependency counselor, right, for 29 years now. But the thing is that I don't do clinical work at Apple, right? Apple is non-clinical and it's designed for people to become and to stay engaged in the recovery process and reduce the likelihood of them returning to substance use or even mental health crisis, right? So that lived experience is very important. These are the 4 supports that all peer support. We provide information, emotional, instrumental, and affiliation support. Very important that all services fall within those four supports. Okay. This is very important when it comes to mental health. Bill Anthony did this, where he talks about the task of professional is to facilitate recovery. So if you are a clinician, right, and then you have someone, or even a recovery coach or peer specialist, our job is not to recover for the injured. The task of the individuals to do the recovery, right? Recovery may be facilitated by even the natural support system of the person, right? Self-help group, 12-step, right? Church, etc. And so we want to make sure that anyone that's in the lives of a person that really encourages them is essential to their recovery. Okay. This is just really a great slide when it comes to recovery can occur even though symptoms reoccur. So if you have mental health challenges, that doesn't mean that we stop with our recovery, right? I always say I have PTSD. And again, I had a 12-step sponsor for 31 years. He passed 2 years ago. Some of y'all might know the beloved Dr. Lewis E. Deer. And of course, but I never had to take medicine or anything like that for PTSD. But the thing is that even with symptoms of fear or whatever that comes up, mad, sad, or scared, right? Then of course, I still move forward in my recovery with my support. Okay. Social determinants of health, very important when it comes to peer support. And so this is another one to understand how the social determinants of health and how they're interrelated, right? And the impact on our mental health and well-being. Uh, these are just more stuff how Apple have engaged in culture, peer support when we come to working in Dallas all the way back to Katrina. And we got a Red Cross award as a first responder way back then. I believe Jessica Martinez and Chad was around then also. But anyway, New Orleans, we had, of course, 25,000 people come from New Orleans to Dallas, right? And to be culturally congruent and to be there for them, right? That it wasn't just business as usual. These were Black folks that actually had a culture of New Orleans that came to Dallas and needed support. Okay, so what's equity got to do with it? My time is almost up, but what does equity have to do with it, right? And the thing is that we have a lot of equity going on. I'm looking at this as the foundation of what's happening around the country when it comes to education around cultural diversity, right? Equity and inclusion. And so these are some of the committees that I'm on or that I'm being educated on. And really the North Texas Behavioral Health Authority, I love it. That again, that they've taken a deep dive, of course, to make sure that the clinicians and the leaders, the staff, everyone really know how do you really provide that equity, right, to the community and to the people that we serve, right? And so a lot of classes we're doing as far as the DEI committee with Dr. Morrow and NITBA, and Dr. Morrow from California, great clinician and psychologist. Faces and Voices of Recovery, we always want to know because being one of the founders for them, for Faces and Voices in Washington, D.C., a lot of great information on the website too, if you want to know about them. So the benefits of peer support, last is to reduce hospitalization, improve social functioning, provide that hope and quality. Substance use, reduce depression, and or mental health challenges. And we saw that earlier, that even with symptoms occurring, recovery doesn't stop. Increase the chances of long-term recovery. Very important, right? And then increase family, the rates of the family and how we do family unification. And then the justice involved and recidivism there, as well as provide hope and security for employers. I think that with that, I'm going to stop there because the rest of it is pretty much just letting you know what to do as far as when something happened or if you feel uncomfortable, right? How to take care of yourself. This is just a menu of services at APA that what we do. We're not fully open yet. We got Kai Stansberry on here with us. She's our new associate director, but the kickoff will be in September when we come back. We'll hopefully that we'll come back to where we're able to provide this array of menu services that we have in front of you. Okay. But I think with that, I'm going to stop here as far as peer specialists. For you to get your certification, or if you know someone that want to be certified, then again, here's just make sure that you can go to the Health and Human Services peer recovery website. You can go to TCB, which is the Texas Certification Board at the bottom, and then they are actually, that's where you know, can get the application and move forward with your certification. But the peer recovery webpage, we have our new peer department at Health and Human Services, and Noah Abdenor is there, the director over there. Great peer department that they have now, that's making sure we move the state, peer movement in the state. So great stuff. We are Medicaid now, eligible now for peer reimbursement. So that's a new thing. And I think I am done. So we did, that's pretty good for 30 minutes, huh?
You did absolutely awesome, and you provided some really rich information. Also, Joe, I just want to put in a plug that you're working with the University of North Texas School of Human Services to launch a peer recovery certificate. We put in a grant request, and we're hoping that that grant comes through. But even if the grant doesn't come through, we're going to find a way to get Joe to be one of our instructors in that program, because it allows us to help young people who may not want to go to college, but need a job, and really have embraced the peer recovery process. You have to self-disclose as a peer that you're in recovery, either mental health or substance use, in order to be in this program. It's a 15-hour program, and our hope is that in our partnership, we'll be able to help equip some young people as well. So Joe, we'll need to talk a little bit more offline and get us connected with how to make it a smooth process, even without the grant. You all have been great, Joe. You had 10 attendees, and we thank you all so much for joining Mr. Powell. He is in South Dallas at APA, and forever available to bring wisdom, insight, and you know, to deal with trauma from a very different perspective. So we appreciate you all. When you leave here, if you can go back to the network or to the schedule and find your next session that you'd like to participate in, we now have those up, and you'll be in holding until the speaker gets in. But we appreciate you all so much. Thank you, Joe. You've got a lot of thank yous.
All righty.
Fill out your surveys. Everyone, please complete your surveys.
Right. All right. Bye-bye.